What's going on, everybody? This is James Graham, Master Facts Voice, and you're here for another Facts Project review. Today, we are going to be covering Vanishing Point, Issue 2 from Mad Cave Studios, written by Mark Russell, art and lettering done by Ryan Alexander Tanner, and coloring done by Sidney Davidson. Now, if you remember when we covered Issue 1 of this particular book, it reads like an anthology, and most of it had to deal with the consumption of space, but also the angle of capitalism and what it tends to overtake in a lot of people. The first issue dealt with a gentleman who was on a mining contract to mine asteroids, and he was sent on a solo mission, and the contract that he had signed detailed that he had to be either in space for at least 10 years, away from his family, or he has an allotment that he has to garner up in order to get down back to Earth sooner. But because he's so isolated, he's overcome with kind of like a space madness, and it eventually overtakes him and bad things happen. But in this particular issue, it's a little bit lighter because it reads into almost the story of the Jetsons, where we meet the Tomorrow family, the life in the year 2100. And all the particulars are there, like a George, a Jane, a Judy, and an Elroy, and even a Rosie. But we are met with this whole family and the introduction of a little boy with an eye patch by the name of Cosmo Warner, who is just about Bobby's age, and they are on their way to school. But Bobby doesn't talk like normal kids. He pretty much is where Bobby would come up with the limericks of being like, do you think there'll be sisters in the future? Because he has all these particular problems with Janie, his older sister. Cosmo basically details that his sister's dead. She died in a garbage fire. And that's not something you would generally hear from somebody of that age, like somewhere around like 8 to 9 to 10 years old, right? All the while, he's very surprised by what's happening at this school. He gets fed time and time again, and he's getting all this free lunch, and he's very surprised by it. All the while, like, certain things are happening with the Tomorrow family. They have Tomorrow Travel, which I guess is a travel agency that Linda tends to oversee, but this is Jim Tomorrow. And he's met with this character that's kind of like a Mr. Spacely character that shows him that he's indispensable at work, and he has to continue working and working and working, and he can almost never get fired. But Cosmo, the way this is pretty much brought about is the fact that, they go through their entire day at school, and when they're basically breaking, hey, Cosmo, I'll see you tomorrow, Cosmo's like, can I come home with you guys? And, Bobby just pretty much says, yeah, sure. And Cosmo's just a little kid, to where it seemed as though in the beginning when he was in school that the amount of food that they gave him surprised him, and because he was very hungry, and the fact that he was able to get constant meals kind of surprised him. And even when he goes back to the Tomorrow family's home, he's still surprised by the amount of food that he's getting. So much so that he becomes emotional and starts to tear up. But you start to see certain things that are starting to happen. The mother, Linda, takes him to a med unit to help him to repair his eye, and he can't even remember the last time that he was able to see through that eye, and he was able to get the treatment that he needed, and he was evidently saved by Linda and his family by the comforts of what they're going through in their home. There's like simple things that they can take care of easily. So, Cosmo has these things to where he's been staying with them for a couple days, and Bobby is like, hey man, what's the matter? Dude, what's it like at your house? And it's like, I don't really want to leave. Like, he doesn't want to leave this family. And the second he says please, the panel shifts to a grown man on a ventilator with an eye patch, just like Cosmo in the story. And then you start to see this Twilight Zone turn to where Cosmo is actually a grown man who lives in a subsidized housing, and he's about to die. He's on a ventilator, and he has the eye patch, what you saw from a young Cosmo Warner. And this is all pretty much a dream sequence that turns into a nightmare, because in the world of 2100, he's almost being repoed for certain things because he's about to die. It's almost like a storage facility. When you can't pay anymore, they pretty much auction everything that you have in your home. So he's laying face up on a carpet. Two men break in, notice that he's still alive, and then start to steal things from the house, understanding that he's going to die anyway, that he's pretty much on this ventilator. But the thing is, he has a subscription for his air, and his air is about to run out. So all the while, he can't pay for more oxygen. His house is getting ransacked. He can't do anything about it. And then the people that pretty much have this happen to him set the whole place on fire. So it's almost like, once again, like the first issue, where you have that capitalistic turn to where something so sadistic and so evil can happen to somebody because of the maintenance of living. Saying that basically in the world 2100, there might be an oxygen subscription is like a death wish for anybody that can't afford it. And Cosmo had to learn that the hard way. But all the while, what we saw in those first initial pages were him remembering a time where he felt the most happy, probably watching an animated series called The Tomorrow Family, which reminded me of the Jetsons. And that's the scary plot of this, and how this kind of like transforms. And it's safe to say that Mark Russell was doing some amazing things with the story constructions of where he took it with issue 1, which dealt with somebody pretty much down on their luck and wanted to set up his family for a decent amount of time, but evidently couldn't live up to the contract that he signed up for. And then you have somebody like Cosmo, who took out an oxygen subscription because the world is so bleak, you can't even breathe. And when you can't pay for your oxygen, you don't live anymore. And your personal valuables don't belong to you anymore. And that's the world that you could possibly live in. So very strong as to how these stories are basically being formulated. But I will be getting into Vanishing Point this entire series, because Mark Russell is just doing amazing things with this. Shout out to Mad Cave Studios for putting this together. This is awesome. We will be talking about more of this on the channel. See you guys next time.